With your feet in the air and your head on the ground, try this trick and spin it, yeah. Your head'll collapse, but there's nothing in it, and you'll ask yourself, where is my mind? Where is my mind? With your feet in the air and your head on the ground, try this trick and spin, yeah. Your head'll collapse, but there's nothing in it, and you'll ask yourself, where is mine?
Please welcome the Undercroft's very own Michael Hurdle Dorsey.
Good evening, Undercroft. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Dorsey, or as many of you know me, Turtle. It's very nice to see everybody joining us this evening. Thank you for joining us on our open live stream. Tonight, we have a great presentation put forth by one of our esteemed guild members, known as the Clever Shark. He'll be talking about Metasploit and exploitation. So we really appreciate everybody joining us this evening for that. One thing I do want to take a moment and do really quick is recognize our winner from last week. For those of you who joined us, who put forth questions and or comments in our chat, either live in our guild chat or live on YouTube, we did hold the drawing. And so I want to go ahead and take a second and recognize our winner. sure you hit like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat in either our guild chat, or if you're on YouTube on there, and we'll make sure that you're all entered for the drawing tonight. So without further ado, it is my sincere pleasure to introduce to you my apprentice in the Undercroft, a good friend and a very knowledgeable security practitioner, somebody who's grown leaps and bounds in a very short period of time. And I'm very, very, very proud to be able to introduce him tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the clever shark himself, Zoran Jovic.
It's time for Sploits Are Us with Zoran, Clever Shark Jovic. It's time for Sploits.
All right. I think we can, you guys can hear me. So thank you very much for that introduction. I think you give me credit that I'm hopefully going to earn tonight, right? So without much more talking, I want to get into the presentation, right? So Sploits Are Us. Tonight's presentation is going to be a primer on exploitation in general and Metasploit as a vehicle of getting exploitation done, right? So we're going to have try to dig in a little deeper into what exploitation is, what Metasploit does, and then pray to demo gods a bit and make sure that everything works. So let's go ahead and just kind of go through some agenda and housekeeping with a little nod to pen testing steps here, right? I'm trying to be clever. So we're gonna start with the who, what, where, and why. Just a little introduction, and then we're gonna do a little recon. In other words, we're gonna get some intelligence on pen testing, on exploitation, high level stuff, right? And then we're going to scan Metasploit and figure out what the components are, what the functionality is, what it does. Then we're going to actually demonstrate some exploits, and at the end I'll give you guys some closing thoughts. This is going to be my opinion and me sharing some knowledge, right? So obviously, if you guys have additional questions past that, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. And finally, I'll give you some resources, right? What to do when you get done if you want to go play a little bit more. So with that being said, I'm just going to point out to the guild that I have posted some instructions in the chat. So if you do want to start, if you want to play around and use that target machine, you're welcome to do so. Just play nice, right? Let's try not to crash it. I don't know if it's going to be up and running, but hopefully it will survive tonight. So why are we here, right? Well, what's the point of this talk, right? So the goal of my presentation is just to give you a little better understanding of exploitation, right? And specifically how it relates to pen testing, right? Exploitation can be many different things, and if you're an attacker, it's going to be probably done one way. If you're doing red teaming, it might be done a little bit different, and if you're doing pen testing, it's going to be done differently, and that's what I'm going to focus on in the context of pen testing, right? So we're going to be using Metasploit as a tool or a vehicle to help us understand how exploitation is done. It's an amazing tool for both newer aspiring practitioners, kind of like myself, right? And for seasoned pros, right? It can do many things for people who are already in the industry and have a lot of experience. So I guess my points are going to be that I'm going to try to make is that exploitation can be trivial, but also we need to get a deeper understanding of what exactly Metasploit does, how it operates, and knowing that, having that knowledge will help you become much more efficient and effective as a pen tester, right? And like I said, there's something for everyone there, whether you're new or a seasoned pro. And as a bottom line, I'm going to try to sort of answer the question or hint throughout it, right? Why is exploitation done in the first place, right? And what business value does exploitation or maybe pen testing in general provide, right? Why should your clients pay for these types of assessments, right? So let's go ahead and move on to a little bit about me, right? So I am the cleverest of all sharks, and I can strike at any time, anywhere, and so on. So I am first and foremost, I'm a father and a husband. Nothing really matters more so than your family. And I'm a pen tester currently. I have been for about the past year. I've sort of recently switched careers, right, from doing other things. Let's see, I tend not to sleep as much as I should, or maybe sleep at odd hours. So I think it helps me to have my own uninterrupted time at night where everybody else is sleeping. I can go and play with stuff and learn, right? So it could be a project, it could be something that I literally just kill a lot of time. Give you guys an example. I think over the last couple of weeks, I've probably killed, who knows, 150 hours on learning about microbiology, how RNA, DNA, viruses, replication. It will never serve me. I'm never going to become a doctor. And it's kind of wasted time, but I can have a random conversation with somebody now. So, I guess I'm probably a normal guy, right? Overall. And I'm the I would say the nice Slav in the guild, right? I usually don't rip on people as much as somebody else. We won't name any names here. So what I've done, I'm fairly new to cyber, like I said. In title, at least, I've spent the last 20 years doing a lot of stuff, right? Everything from consulting, project management, training, related to IT, all of it, right? I've ran teams of upwards, 120 people or more, right? Large organizations. So a lot of that involved sales. I would argue that everything in life involves sales. So I think that sales background has helped me with some of the things I'm going to talk about today, right? I've done those things for Fortune 10 companies, and I've done them for, Fortune 1099, aka myself. And obviously have seen both of those sides of the coin, right? What else? I have been in the Army reserves for a little time, short time. I never deployed, so I don't even consider title of a veteran earned, right? But so few years back, I left a cozy job. I went gung-ho into cyber, got some credentials, got some certifications, a little bit of experience here and there, went and learned as much as I can. And so I'd say I got a bit of knowledge too. I've been told that I'm good at solving problems. I guess I've demonstrated it before, and that I do a great job communicating with non-technicals, right? So people that write paychecks and might not be the IT people. I think it's my salesy background that helps me there, and also I've had a lot of mentors in past that have helped me grow and communicate. And going back to I believe it was Tramir that was talking about being able to communicate and about your work is super important. So I feel I can do that, right? I've happened to be in the right place at the right time a few times in my life, and it's important to take initiative at those times. So a few years back, I decided that I want to do what I was really passionate about, what I started doing in the early 2000s, and decided to sort of retool myself in cybersecurity. So here I am, right? In outside of work and security and all of that, I'm really into mountain biking. Recently, you might not be able to tell, I'm gaining weight, but interestingly enough, Tampa has zero mountains and some amazing single tracks, right? So I guess you don't need mountains for that. I do volunteer with the Swamp Mountain Bike Club, a local club here, and some amazing guys. So if anyone is into biking, if you want to go go on a ride with me, hit me up in the chat. And if you want to volunteer, we can plan and organize stuff, or just go pack dirt on the trails and keep them nice and neat. So let me know about that too. What else? I love music of every kind. I do try mixing house music. I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I try. So if we do have a party of some sort, I'll show up with my setup and mix a little bit. I don't take I don't take song requests. I'm an artist, so I play whatever I can, whatever I practiced before. So nowadays, honestly, I don't really have a lot of time to do that, because it's not the same if you just are playing it at low volume and having a kid and just life. It's sort of impossible to just blast music all day long or at night, right? What else? Obviously, I was born in a different country, right? So I do follow world affairs somewhat. I'm into history. I used to remember like everything, and I think I don't know what happened. Google happened, or Wikipedia, or something happened. Now I can't remember any dates for the life of me, right? Maybe my birthday I'm going to forget soon, but in any case, I do like that. And if you want to have a conversation about a specific battle in World War II, I can probably hold my own. And finally, hacking, right? I say that with intent, that I do like to mess with things and see how they work and try to fix them, or mainly what it means, try to break them, right? So, I've fixed my car many times. A lot of times I have an extra part and I don't have a clue where it came from. So that's kind of how it works out. Cooking, I see cooking as a great example of hacking, right? Love going to a restaurant, eating something, and then coming back home and trying to not look up the recipe and just kind of do it from scratch. So that's what I'm into. What I'm not, I am not an expert. I'm not an expert on exploitation or pen testing, right? To give credit, I used a lot of knowledge that I'm going to share with you guys from other sources, right? From people who have invented this stuff, or some of my mentors that have a lot of experience. And so, I think I can talk about it, and obviously do have to give credit where credit's due. And finally, I'm not a ninja. It seems like all the talks we have, everybody's got like, some kind of lethal training, man. I'm afraid to like make eye contact at the guild. So I'm not a ninja. I do have a reversible black belt. It's black and brown, and I will use that to defend myself, right? So all of this was fake news, by the way. All right, so let's talk about security assessments, right? Just kind of to give a little context here. So security assessments, there are many different ways to slice and dice them. And, I kind of want to just go very high level, right? Auditing it would be like one of the first ones that comes to my mind, right? So auditing is an assessment that, you assess your system or controls or whatever it is against a specific standard, against specific guidelines or best practices or whatever it is. So auditing is great, it's necessary, but it's only as good as that standard is, right? And quite frankly, attackers don't necessarily follow, standards. So, your auditing is good, but I don't think it's enough, right? And especially, you see my little graphics there. If it's self-assessment, you might get into a lot of trouble. So vulnerabilities, right? Those get exploited. So vulnerability assessments are important, and it basically it's a scan. It's something that we check for vulnerabilities that are known, and to see if they can be exploited. Right? Important, but again, it doesn't really tell us if the true risk. Right? And then that's where pen testing comes in. Right? So yeah, we have this vulnerability, but can the attacker really exploit it, right? And how many of those are exploitable, right? So pen testing really is a broad assessment, and we try to identify where and how an attacker might compromise the system, right? Period. And with a goal of closing those gaps, right? So we prove that it's a true positive, right? It's not a false positive, and now we got to do something to close it. And then red teaming and purple teaming, I'll sort of bunch them up together. I think those are a little more focused, and they, as opposed to pen testing and being broad, they're focused and they go deep, right? And one of the key points there is we should really measure, detection capability and response, right? So not just, hey, attacker might do this, but what are you seeing when the attacker is doing it, and how you're responding? And now let's try it again, right? So in my opinion, I guess, red teaming is the best type of assessment. Purple teaming maybe, right? And unfortunately, a lot of companies don't want to pay for it, and they just want to sort of limit the time and the scope and everything just to sort of get a check mark. But that's outside the scope of this talk. So many other ways to slice and dice this, right? We can talk about the level of knowledge. It can be white box, black box. It can be, internal, external. In my opinion, if you are working on a blue team, if you're on a red team, if you're a decision maker, especially, I would try to have your assessments with as much knowledge as possible, as much time, and as wide of a scope as possible. That way, the assessing team can truly, provide value, give you something that you can work with, right? So, and I'll touch on that towards the end, what we can do to help with that. So, let's go ahead and move into exploitation, right? So, what's exploitation, right? It's sort of a key principle in pen testing, right? So it's really just any method, in general terms, any method, any tool that allows you to exploit some vulnerability, to do something to a target, right, where you otherwise shouldn't be able to. It could be running a code on a host. It could be, doing some action on a network. It could even be doing, getting a user to do something, right? So it's a way to especially in the context of pen testing, it's a way to show the target is truly vulnerable, right? So we are removing false positives, and then in some cases, maybe even finding, removing some false negatives, right? Finding some things that our vulnerability scanners wouldn't be able to find, right? So there are inherent risks every time you exploit something, right? We can break a service, we can crash something, who knows, right? As a matter of fact, it might just not work, right? I think Eternal Blue, maybe the most famous exploit, at least of our age, or my age, I guess. It's known to cause blue screen of death, or not work the first 4 times and then works all of a sudden, just kind of randomly. So exploits are tricky like that, and especially when you're doing a live demo, right? So hint we'll see how that goes later. But and as a point, I think I'll bring that up a little bit more later. We want to make sure that we have as much information about a target before we exploit. that will help us get it to not crash something or to work more reliably, right? So, and just quickly, I think most everybody knows this, but when you start your pen test, right, assessment, you plan it out first. Do all the calls. You do a little recon or a lot of recon. You scan your target, right? Enumerate, figure out exactly what's there and what you're working with, and then your exploitation comes in once you have that knowledge. Post exploitation would involve, moving around the target, really figuring out what impact you can make as an attacker, right? And then reporting is really your end product, right? Providing that value to a customer and giving them your findings, right? So. With that being said, let's talk about exploits a bit more. So there are many different ways to also categorize exploits, and I'll use these three top ones. I got this from a training I took that was excellent. And the service side exploits are going to be your first ones. It's ones that we hear a lot about. Basically, you exploiting a service on a machine, right? A listening service on a machine. So this could be, SMB, RDS, HTTP, whatever it is, right? It's a vulnerable service that's listening, and it can be on a server. It can be really on any machine. And generally it's TCP or UDP or something like that, some sort of a port that's open and listening. So these exploits get a lot of sort of press, I would say, because those security bulletins that come out, they're generally for these types of exploits. Usually your vulnerability scanners, if you're using a good one, can find these, right? So you can patch them quickly and so on. As an attacker, they could be tricky to exploit, or as a matter of fact, if the organization is doing a good job, you might not be able to do it at all, right? And I'll talk about how to protect ourselves from those. The next sort of section, right, or category, and I think much more dangerous one, and probably in the last whatever years, real attacks are using client side a lot more. So this is focusing on a client application, right? So a client that must be connected to some server to get content. So this basically can give us the client allows us to execute code, right? The victim allows us to execute code, right? So that could be we set up a listening service. They do something. They give us that permission, right? And then we can attack it. This could be anything from, I don't know, a Java application. It could be mobile application, right? It could even be Word or something like that. Or it could be a person, right? Johnny at over in finance or whatever, right? So phishing on that note is probably the most recognizable example of, and I would say that's a client-side attack. Like a client is your person. So it can be done many different ways, and especially hard to protect because it's people, and people will do things, and we should not rely on training only, right, to stop these attacks. So it's very hard to harden against these. On a quick side note here, as a pen tester, if you are doing phishing engagements, I would be very careful who you target and how you deploying that campaign, I guess, because people can access email from everywhere, and very quickly you could send out this phishing email with your malicious link or whatever it is, and somebody accesses that from a different machine that does not belong to that organization, and now you are out of scope, and you could get in a lot of trouble, right? You could be sued, you could be ending up in jail or whatever. So if you guys are interested in hearing about that, ask a question, or I can always post something about it too. Plenty of resources online, obviously. And then the last category I have is privilege escalation, right? And a local privilege escalation. So bottom line is, whenever we get access to some system, generally we're going to be some sort of a non-privileged user in today's day and age. So in order to really do, I mean, you can do stuff, right? And we'll see that today. But in order to really, do a lot of damage or show value, pivot to other machines, get to that, juicy information, the credit card numbers or whatever it might be. You generally need, admin privileges, right? So these exploits are geared to elevate your privilege or escalate your privilege from a normal user to a privileged one. Many ways they can happen. I'm definitely not an expert, but I know race conditions, basically trying to execute something before the first action gets completed are one way you can do that, right? And there are programs in all operating systems that require root privileges to run, right? So SUID 0 in Linux and system privileges in Windows. So you log on, your password changing programs and stuff like that require escalated privileges. So attackers can exploit that, and Metasploit is pretty decent at it. But there are many other tools, and if you have not played around with Empire, PowerShell Empire, do so. It's amazing, probably easier to use than Metasploit, and does great. So, and like I said, Metasploit can do all of these in many different forms. So, let's talk about what Metasploit is, right? So, sort of high level, right? It's a exploitation framework, right? It's a collection of capability. And I left that screenshot there. I'm pretty sure a few guild members have something like that going on in their closet or whatever. But Metasploit is basically your locker, right? And it has all this capability, and it can help you run exploits, validate vulnerabilities. It can help you reduce the chances of like crashing a system. Maybe most importantly, it can help you save time and effort, right? Collaborate and so on. It's free. I've never really needed to anything that doesn't exist in a free version, and I think the pro version is expensive. Maybe like 15,000 a year or something like that. It's pretty expensive. The pro version does have, I think, some steps to automate your workflow. Maybe some reporting and collaboration tools as well. Again, I'm not very familiar with it besides just reading, but it is what is it not, right? Just the point, it works on Linux. Obviously, we all use Linux, but it works on Windows, it works on Mac, and the actual attacks, right? The exploits are for every kind of operating system. I think probably the most is for Windows, just because there's more Windows machines and all of that. So what is it not? Metasploit is not a auto pawn tool, right? It will not make you an Uber hacker. It will not help you make money, provide business value, right, to an end user client, unless you sort of know how to use it and able to sort of put the pieces together, right? It's an exploit tool and a little bit more than that, but you still have to sort of have that knowledge, right? So I advocate for not just learning how to use a tool, but sort of understanding what it does, right? And as a matter of fact, Metasploit has 1,900 or whatever. I see it all the time, and I don't ever look at the number, but huge number of exploits, right? And then there is additional ones that you can import in Metasploit, and then there is additional ones that you sort of exploit manually, right? And if you don't, really deep dive into these exploits, you'll sort of miss out on those manual exploitation ones. And so before you run an exploit, learn what it does and try to really understand it, right? It will pay you dividends down the line, right? So a little bit more sort of info, enumeration on Metasploit. not going to go through this whole thing, but these are the components of it. You do have tools and plugins that work with it. Probably where we live, or where I'm going to live today, is the interfaces are important, right? To know and get familiar with, and then your modules, right? If you want to know about what every single one of these things is, hit up Metasploit Unleashed course, and they just have a lot of information if you want to dig in, as how Ruby works, which ones of these are classes, which ones are methods, and which ones are overloaded or not, and how it's some great info. But I'll skip it for the sake of time. So I do want to talk about modules, right? So exploits are actual exploits, right? Things that take advantage of a vulnerability, things that get us access, right? Auxiliary module has your scanners, your fuzzers, your sniffers. I mean, it has a lot. Probably what I use a lot is the auxiliary modules, just because of versatility there, right? Payloads are what you do on a target, what you execute on a target, and I'll talk a little bit more about payloads in a slide or so. And then no ops, these are special modules, right? They're just no operation instructions, right? And they can help your execution on the target by manipulating how memory locations in memory and what processor sees. So they're really useful. And if you've never heard of them, literally Google them. I kind of blew my mind the first time I understood no ops and how to really use them, right? And then I skipped evasion and encoders. Obviously, we do want to make it to the target, right? And we do want to, encode our payload so it can be executed there. So that's what evasion encoders do. And MSF Venom is sort of combining those two. So I'll touch base on it and show you guys how that works. And then finally, we have post exploitation. So some pivoting capability, some privilege escalation as well, right? If you're running on Linux, here's your user share, modules, framework modules, or those are the preloaded ones. If you add your own, they're going to be at that location, right? When you're adding your own, just pass the -M option to MSF console, and you can load additional modules from a terminal. You can use load path command in there, and so on. Again, few different ways, and check out the Metasploit Unleashed class for that. It gives a lot of information, right? So a few more slides or one maybe. So the interface and the database, right, is important. So MSF console is what we're probably most used the general standard way to get in, right? It has all the functionality that's all the functionality would be accessible if you go through MSF console, right? Just type it in. -H is your help command, and that's what we're going to be demoing today, right? The MSF CLI is a command line interface, right? It's a bit different. Basically, you can run the entire exploit from one line, right? And it's basically, the idea here is you can script operations, right? You can script your exploits and just incorporate it into your own tool. So MSF CLI is maybe no longer a valid command. I really haven't tried it in a long time, but I think you can do MSF console X and then type in your command. MSF RPCD is a Metasploit basically controlled over XML. So it's a remote procedure call, and it's a encrypted access TCP port, I think 55553, something like that, and basically allows you to run Metasploit remotely from maybe a different application that can communicate over SSL. MSF daemon is a listener. So anyone can connect, and it's a great tool if you're working on a team and you guys have shell on there or whatever, right? And you want somebody else to access your sessions and stuff like that. So finally, I brought up earlier MSF Venom, right? It's basically an interface or a module that converts your payload into a standalone file, right? So, .exe, JavaScript, binary files, anything like that. And not just that you convert it, you also can encode it and do other things to avoid the detection, right? So MSF payload, MSF encode used to be the names. I think it's all combined now into Venom. And finally, I've actually never used Armitage. It's a GUI that works with MSF remote procedure call interface. So let's see what else. We have the database, right? MSF does Metasploit supports a database, and it's I wouldn't even call it an interface, but it's a functionality of Metasploit, and you can use it to save yourself a lot of time and effort. So with that being said, let me go ahead and start up my demo here. Of course, like 2 seconds before I did this, it logged out. We are going to first demo is just basically going to be very quick. Let's take a look at Metasploit components and some basic commands and see how they work, right? So I'm going to switch us over to Kali. All right. What we want to do is, for the sake of time, right? You want to load up our database, initialize it, right? So and oh, I can't type. All right, system control, start the database. I'm misspelling something. Start. Yep. All right, I can't seem to type, so. All right, so start my database. So then I'm going to just initialize it, right? So MSF DB and initialize it. Database already started, initialized, right? So to get into Metasploit, and I'm actually gonna go ahead and increase it one more time just so you guys can see that. To get into Metasploit, MSF console, give it a second, and let's see. It's going to start, and it's going to give us that nice little banner. All right, so let's go ahead and clear that out. All right, banner, obviously you can just type in banner, do it again, right? So a couple of commands, right? So basic commands, right? Search is going to be maybe your most common command, right? So search, I don't know, I'm just going to say search Windows. There's going to be a lot of stuff here, right? So that's going to be quite a bit, and I might not be able to, it's going to spend way too much time on it, right? So let's see, we can search, let's search type of exploit, right? We're going to say post, and I don't know, I'll say Windows. Yeah, so now I'm getting post with Windows, right? Or let's go ahead and maybe actually we can do this. How about this? You can grep in Metasploit. So grep 9, and this will make sense in a second. And then I'm going to search for a module that's in Metasploitable 3, right? So it will give me only a few options, right? So grep is amazing, and you know, I can even actually go a bit more. I can now say platform and Windows. So now, boom, I got only one option, right? I got, as a matter of fact, let's clear that up and I'll bring it up to you guys. So now I got only one exploit that affects this manage engine service and you know, 9, because I know what it is, and it's running on platform Windows, right? So I can also do let's say info on auto tab also works on it, right? So exploit Windows HTTP manage engine and which one's this connect? All right, so if I want to know a little bit more about the actual exploit, I can type in info option, and then I can find out, okay, so here's the information that I need to know about it, right? So, you know, here's my R host, my port, and, you know, a little bit description about it, and then other resources that I can go ahead and look at the vulnerability or the service itself, right? While we have that here, right? So obviously we would need to set our host, right? So that command would be, you know, set. So set and our host with, you know, you can do a cap. Some people, you know, always capitalize that. You don't have to, and you know, set the R host to whatever your IP address is. And actually, in my case, it's I'm gonna go ahead and actually just set it right now. So for you guys, if you're doing the Amazon service, obviously it's going to be a little bit different. So if I just type that in, this is on my local network, it will set the R host for that. Or if I do set G, this is going to be global, right? So now it's going to sort of, let's say, persist across different exploits, right? So it's super useful if you know you're sort of working with one target, right? And then if we do, if we repeat that command, oh, actually, I'm not using the exploit, so it didn't set it, but we'll do that once we actually start doing the exploit, right? What else? There are, you know, going back and you know, there's just billion different commands, right? That you can do. You know, just type do help, and you can see all of those. One of the useful ones is jobs. So there's no active jobs right now, but if I actually had an exploit that's jobified, right, that's running in the background, I'd be able to see that. If I had a connection established already, I can do sessions, and you know, I'd see those. I can see, you know, show a bunch of different stuff. Show command is actually interesting, right? So almost anything you do, and I'll show that in the actual demo. So let's see. One other thing I wanted to show at this time is the database, right? So we started the database, and it could be very useful to sort of save you, at minimum, save you brain power, right? So let's go ahead to check your database, right? You're gonna do db underscore status, and you know, it tells us it's connected to Metasploit, and you know, the type of database we're using. So let's go ahead and actually do a little bit with the database. Let me clear that. So useful command, most of us in our pen testing sort of work, right? We will do what Patsy taught us last time, right? So we're going to go plan out stuff. We're going to do some recon, and then you'll do your scan and your enumeration. Nmap is sort of a gold standard, right? So most of the time, I find myself that I do run Nmap well before going into Metasploit, right? But the entire basically capabilities is available here. So basically, if I want to run Nmap, I'll just do db underscore Nmap, and let's go ahead and let's not resolve names. We'll just do a quick sweep, and I think I still have my machine there. Yeah. So starts Nmap. You can do, might not be able to do everything, but honestly, I have not really found an option yet that didn't work. So we'll revert to Patsy for that. And as you can see, it's a regular Nmap, and it shows me some ports. This is just like a basic scan, right? So what's interesting now is if we when we run it from database inside of Metasploit, this is going to add that host. So hosts, this is going to add that host to my database, right? So you can see it here. If I go and say services, right, it's going to tell me, what services are on that host. And obviously, if you have other hosts and more stuff you have, it will populate there. You can also, let's say, for the sake of time, right? I have not going to run Nmap here, but I do have an Nmap scan that I ran earlier, right? Just to nothing complicated, just something that I can import. And for you guys, I think you can just go to that paste bin, and if you want to follow along on that target, you can literally just import it, save yourself time, so you don't have to scan anything. So what we're going to do, the command for import is db import, and now I'm going to choose what I'm doing. So I'm doing root, and my file was, but what did I say? I think it was the IP address, so 192. Yep. So it's an XML output format on Nmap. So when you do that in Nmap, you do the -O capital X, puts it in XML. So here's my previous scan that I ran, and I'm just going to go ahead and import it, and you can see that's imported. So if I go back now and run host, I still have one host. If I run services, as you can see here, we had a few. On my other Nmap scan, I think I did more than just the top port. So I have a few more listed, and maybe a little bit more info on them. So very useful. On that note, Nmap isn't the only thing that you can import, right? You can, if you run your vulnerability scan, you can import that and get all of your information to show up in Metasploit, right? And to do that, you would go ahead and do vulns command, and it will list your vulnerabilities. I haven't really done that because I know all the vulnerabilities in this machine, or at least for the demo, didn't worry about that. If you do want to sort of get a little bit more about any command, you can do the -H, and then that's your help menu, right? So it will give you other options you have. So for example, you can do -P and then port 8020 or whatever, right? We haven't done that yet, but and as a matter of fact, I've really never done it with Nmap, but I'm pretty sure we can do let's say services. Yeah, so if I do services in a specific port, it will cut down on the amount of screen real estate being used, right? So to sort of wrap this demo up, I just kind of want to show a little bit of a exploit, I guess. Like I said, I do use a lot of auxiliary scanners. So anytime I find a vulnerability, or some tool thinks there's a vulnerability, I like to sort of validate it more than one way. So Nmap has a lot of great scripts that you can validate vulnerabilities. We've seen some of those last week. And Metasploit has that too. So bunch of scanners. And one that I'm gonna show here. So we're gonna use as a command to load a exploit, right? So we're gonna use auxiliary scanner and FTP, because I know the server has FTP and we could easily find that in our Nmap scan, and FTP FTP login. So now I have selected that exploit, and I can do show options. So here is my options, right? So a bunch of options on this one, right? And let's see, my host wasn't set. So let me go ahead and do that. Set our, and I think this one is because it's the our host variable. That's why it didn't take. But set my our host, and we'll try to do that global, and we'll see what happens later if it saves it. So here's my host set, and because I'm trying to find the FTP login, right, I'm going to provide it with some other information. So let's see, brute force speed, I'm going to leave it the way it is, 0 to 5. It's my own server, so I can do it at any speed I want. Let's see, the port is already set. It's necessary, right? Stop on success is false, and that's definitely good, because otherwise you might have a billion usernames you're trying, and one of them in the middle is going to say success, and you're just not going to see it. So let's set that to true. What else is required? Threads is fine, and verbose is fine. So the only other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set up a couple of things. So let's go ahead and set my my password file. Pass file to what was it called? It was wordless.txt. So so find that file, wordless.txt, okay. And I can also, because I'm using the same, just to keep this simple, I'm using the same user file as well. So user file is the same thing. And then the only other thing I want to do is, let's see, user, there is an option here, and to try user add password. I guess it really doesn't matter for me, but there is an option here to try user and password as the same thing, right? So I can just run it like this, and to execute any sort of exploit, you can do exploit, or you can just do run, we can see it running. It's trying different things, and boom, here it is. Login successful, vagrant, right? So that's a quick exploit for you, and that's a quick way to sort of scan something, or maybe in our case here, brute force something. So with that being said, there's here we're getting credentials, right? If you get a little bit further down, and you getting hashes and usernames and stuff like that, you can do credentials. They have a creds. Let's see, creds. Oh, not typing. So creds help, and there's a command that's credentials, right? So it will let you manipulate credentials. It will let you save them, and so on. You can delete them. So it's super useful if you're dealing with a lot of stuff, right? So you can set a bunch of options there. So that's a quick sort of intro to Metasploit, some basic things, and I'm going to go back to the slide, talk a little bit more about exploits, right? So what is an exploit? exploit is, like I said earlier, code or action that exploits a vulnerability, right? Something that allows us access to the target, right? We take advantage of a vulnerability, right? And there's active exploits. These basically run and complete. So this was the scanner one. Let's say that's an active exploit, right? It was running, and when it was completed, boom, we stopped. It's done, right? A lot of exploits do that. And then there's passive exploits that basically run in a background session, and then you get a notification when something happened, right? You either failed or it succeeded, right? And then there's the special one, right? Multi-handler is a special type of exploit. It in essence doesn't exploit at all, right? But what it does, it creates a listener on your machine, and then when you get a client side sort of exploitation going on, when you get a user or an application or something to happen on the target machine, it phones back to your listener and does something like opens up a shell or something like that. So in multi-handler, in order for it to work, you have to create a payload. You have to get that payload somehow to the target, get it to execute somehow, and then you have to have your listener, and and we'll see how that works later. So been talking about payloads quite a bit here. Let's go ahead and just kind of jump into what a payload is, right? So it's exploits a vulnerability and gets us in, where payload is whatever we want to do there. It's in Metasploit terms, it's code that's being executed on a target and that does something. Most generally, gives us a shell, right? And then we can take it from there, right? And there is sort of three different types of payloads, or I guess payloads consist of a stage and a stager. So stage is code or function or something that you are actually executing on the target, right? So that's your execution. And then the stager is your communication with that stage, right? So somehow you have to communicate with whatever you're doing over there. So I think of it as a stage being that bomb, right? And a stager would be the plane that actually, goes there, drops the bomb, or something like that. And then there's singles. Singles are basically payloads that are self-containing and that have both the stage, whatever is being executed, and the communication put together. And envision that as a cruise missile, right? Doesn't need an airplane necessarily to get there and blow up stuff. So hopefully that kind of puts a little perspective and how that looks in Metasploit. You can see, I'm sure you guys have seen the naming convention, right? But your stage would be the red, right? And then your stager would be the green. And now if we're doing a single, their stage and stager and all of that stuff is marked with the underscore. And some popular or common stagers you're going to see on there, right? So bind stagers are basically they create a listener on a target, and you're communicating to that listening service on a target, to that listener that you have created, right? Versus reverse stagers, they create a listener on your machine, and then the target communicates back to you. So why would that be important, right? If you know it's a vulnerable service and you're within scope, you might just want to do bind TCP and just go for it. If you get blocked by a firewall or something like that, reverse might work in some cases, right? So just a little bit of difference. And there's hops also. Hops are basically just like a hop in a network, right? Or a proxy. It just basically allows you to communicate through another hop, right? So very useful in some situations. And otherwise, payloads, like I said, we do have a bunch of the options for them to encode them, to encrypt them, and so on, right? So MSF Venom and even some other things. So, Meterpreter, right? Probably the most popular, I guess, payload you can find in Metasploit. It's the reason it's popular, right? It's very good. I would say it's reliable. Also, it does not spawn its own process or service on a target, right? So it kind of has a little bit of evasion already, built in, right? So it's a stage, it's a shell. It does a lot more stuff, right? Like I said, it's memory resident. It injects into a DLL, and then you can also migrate from process to process, right? So it might be much harder to detect. You can migrate. It has have built-in features and commands, so some useful things to move around the target, check the target, bunch of different stuff to do, screenshots and so on. And it works, I think, on most platforms. Another interesting point here is it's actually encrypted communication, right? So if you are communicating, nobody can read what you're doing. I say that with an asterisk, and I'll talk about it a bit later. So let's go ahead and see how that works, right? Let's do a little exploit on our target here. So clear everything. Again, I'm gonna do. Let me just run my host, or actually services. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the entire vulnerability scan, and but like I said, I did find some interesting services, right? So this 80/20, let's say I did my research, I enumerated a lot, and I guess that's a good point to make here. The more you enumerate, the more time you spend on figuring out what you have exactly, what's on there, how it's vulnerable, and so on. The more likely you're going to be to be able to exploit anything. So let's go ahead and visit our site here, and I'm going to go to port 8020 because it had that Apache server, and oh look, it's a desktop, Central 9. Okay, great. Yeah, so that gives us an idea that that's a service there. And if we do a little bit more research, we're going to find out that it does have a vulnerability, right? So let's go ahead and try to find. So we're gonna go do search. What was it? It was a manage engine, I think. Manage engine, and let's do platform. Platform Windows. So here's my exploits, and I know for a fact that it's a desktop Central 9. We just saw that on the actual information disclosure vulnerability that they have over there. So we'll go ahead and use that exploit. And let's see what options do we have. I always run show options, because especially if you have more than one target, and it's super easy to get them confused, right? And if your memory is like shot like mine is. So you can see that when we said that our host, right, we did it globally, so that's still on there. So that kind of helps us save a little bit of time, right? So let's see what else. That's it. I'm gonna do it without doing anything else, and let's see what happens. Should be able to get a shell, as long as my target is still running, and it looks like it is. All right, so we have shell, And I actually, if you guys are practicing around and if you start getting some errors, this is the file. If you're on your local machine, on your local VM, this is the file that you have to delete. If it doesn't get deleted by itself, it tends to mess up this exploit. So let's, oh yeah, I'm in Meterpreter. So, all right. So we're going to Meterpreter, right? What commands do we have? So let's do help. Bunch of different commands here. You know, I won't go through all of them, but you can see there it's sort of Linux, right? If you're familiar with Bash, you'll be able to run Meterpreter. So I can do, you know, let's say print working directory. We can see I'm on a target. I can do sysinfo to see if I can type. So here's my target machine, right? Could be a good one to take a screenshot and then show, you know, maybe in your report, if you're not necessarily going deeper on this one. Let's see what else. Get UID is to see what process I am, so we can see I'm a local service. We could escalate that, or elevate it a bit more. What else? Let's see. PS is going to give me a list of running processes on that machine. You know, so I can see everything that's running on there. And usually, you know, so there's these that they don't have anything. Sometimes they'll have your local user or whoever the owner of that process is. What's kind of interesting or nice, let's say you added, you exploited a service, can't think of anything off the top of my head, no, Word, right? Microsoft Word or something like that. And your Meterpreter payload gets loaded in that process, and you know, might freeze up something for the user. So Word is probably not the best one, but you know, and let's say it does freeze up. What's the user going to do? They're going to go ahead and click and exit, and guess what? You're off the target, and it might have taken you, you know, like a day to get on there. So a good thing to do is to try to migrate to a more stable process, right? So just looking at here, there's a bunch of processes that we can try. So so migrate to let's do Explorer. Oh, my bad. So we're going to migrate, and we're going to give it a PID. So it's this first tab here is the PID. So it's a process ID. So we're going to go 6140 and see if that works. It might not. All right. So insufficient privileges for this time. So we cannot migrate to something that has, you know, maybe elevated privileges. So in order to migrate, we have to be at the same level of privileges or higher, right? Let's see. There are other commands you can do here. You can background a session. You can you know, do screenshots. You know, so I guess I can. So screenshot P, and we'll try to take a screenshot and go to root. Let's go to root, desktop, and let's call it screen1.jpg, and let's see if that happens. And if we go over here, ls, okay, that's exactly what I wanted to happen. And you know, I don't want to show you the screenshot. So it's gonna move on. So let's say you can search, you can download, you can upload a file, which could be very useful in you know, you can spawn a shell on your target machine, migrate, and so on, right? So there's plenty of things that you can do with Meterpreter. One of the things I'm going to try, and I'm going to sort of demonstrate, right? It's not going to necessarily work in this case, but we're going to use a module called priv, right? So what we're trying to do, we're trying to manipulate privileges on the target and see if we can elevate him. So the module extension has already been loaded, which is great. And I'm going to do the hash dump command, which on Linux system is going to get you your shadow, try to get your shadow file. And on the Windows is going to try to get the contents of the SAM database, right? So the hash dump did not work, and I think we have something going on, and possibly it's our the level of privileges we have. So I don't know if this is going to be the best way, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go around this and try to maybe get to the target a little bit different, right? So let's see. We talked about that's a service exploit, right? Let's talk about client-side exploits. So I'm going to go back. Oh, I'm typing somewhere else. Oh, exit. All right. So we shut down that service or that session that we had going on, and sessions. We're gonna make sure that it's done so it doesn't mess me up later on. And -L is to list the active sessions so we don't have anything. If there was something, if I wanted to pick it up, I would do the -I, and that's interact, and then it would be a session number. So like session 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever it is. But this time I'm going to go back and clear the screen, right? So we're done with that exploit. Let's go and talk about multi-handler, right? So so let's see our services again. We do have quite a few, and I happen to do my research, and I know this Apache server has something going on here, right? I can see it's PHP and possibly possibly more. So what I'm going to do is go back to that same IP address, and it was 8585. Load it up, and I can see it's a web server, right? I can see it has some things going on, right? Obviously, I can click through stuff. Some things look interesting, right? Or I can, let's say derb it, right? I can do derb and HTTP. What's our 192.168.86.236, and I'm just gonna go 8585, and let's see what do we have, right? So it's gonna go ahead and just I'm trying to brute force and check for all the directories that it has, right? And WordPress admin, surprise, uploads, right? It's listable, blah blah blah. So let's go ahead and just stop that for now. So that uploads directory is very useful for me, and I might wanna sort of take advantage of that, right? So if I go back to my home screen here, click on the uploads. Oh, I do have my old payload here, but I can see that there is an uploads directory, and I could probably use that to exploit this machine, right? So first things first, let me go ahead and create a payload that's going to work on that target, and that's going to take advantage of this Apache server running PHP, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do MSF Venom. As a matter of fact, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy this damn thing so I don't have to misspell it like 15 times. So I'll just walk you through the command, right? So MSF Venom, right? This is the payload I'm creating. So I'm creating a PHP interpreter, reverse TCP payload, because it's going to phone back into me, right? So the local host, which is my IP address, is that. The local port we're going to use is this. So I'm listening on this port number. And then, here's the payload I'm creating. And just so for the sake of it, I'm going to go ahead and say it's, just call it something else. It's going to take about a second or so for MSF Venom to create this payload. And usually you have to kind of go and mess with, just make sure that it's properly formatted and whatnot. So to avoid all these issues, I do have one that I've already, that I know works well. So let's see, how do we get this payload to our target, right? So we got to upload the file. So obviously I can try to email it to do some phishing, try to get somebody to click on it, or upload it some other way, right? So let's see. There's probably a couple of ways that I can figure out, generally on web servers. So if you guys know, request and so on, right? I can probably use a put request to upload any sort of directory, right? So in order for that to happen, I have to make sure that that the target is in fact allowing us to do that. And there's like about 4 billion ways to do that. So let's do Nikto, vulnerability scanner, I guess, for websites. So this is going to be a host. So it's going to be, I'm just going to copy this whole thing right here. So, all right, I got my host, and what else should we do? We should actually check the folder. So folder is uploads, right? I think that's really all I need. And let Nikto run, right? And as it's running, we're gonna go ahead and see a couple of things. So server may leak things. Here it is. HTTP method put allows to save files on a server, and allowed methods. We have options, get, head, poster. It literally has all the methods on there. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. We don't need to run anymore. So I know I can actually upload this file in there. And how to upload it using the put method, there is 4 billion ways, right? One of them is going to be your Nmap. Nmap has a script that will upload put methods. You can do, as a matter of fact, we can do. Let me just, I guess, demo a few. So let's see if curl works. Curl should work. Okay, fail. I think I might have some options wrong here. But curl, maybe I should use a dash capital T or something like that. Curl works, Nmap works, literally 4 billion other ones. The one that I really focus on, and I wanted to sort of show you guys, is, we're talking about Metasploit. So Metasploit, of course, has its own module to do put methods, right? So we're going to go ahead and say use, and the module is auxiliary scanner and HTTP underscore put. All right, and then let's show options. So here's our options, right? So here's my host. It's already loaded in. Here's the port, and as a matter of fact, I don't. As we know, this is a little bit of a different port number here, so I have to adjust some of options. So important to check your show options every time. Otherwise, who knows what could go wrong. So set our port to, what was it, 8585. And let's see, path. We obviously wanna do the path, so we're gonna do our folder was uploads, and show options again. So method is put. File data we got to change, but okay, my path is correct, my hosts are correct, so everything's fine. So file data is obviously what I need to change, right? So let's as far as the name, I can change the name also to something else. I don't think it's too important, right? But so file data is super important. So that's going to be my file. Yeah, you gotta specify a file, and then interpreter.php, right? So as a matter of fact, let's also change. Does list my files, so I can see if my my PHP file looks good, and it looks pretty good. And actually, let's set the file name to new shell or whatever, something. All right, so clear. Show options. All right, so it printed out everything else, so it's kind of looking a little bit funky, but it's there. The next thing, I guess it's let's take our file and upload it. And as you can see, upload probably failed. That I think with this one, it just happens all the time. But auxiliary has completed. Let's go ahead and see. So yeah, here we go. Here's my new shell, file executed. We can see it has some size, and here's the date. So obviously shell is working. Before I actually, before I'm the user that's clicking on that, let's go ahead and set up our listening service, right? So remember, guys, I talked about the multi-handler, right? So handler, it's listening to inbound connections, right? So we're going to go ahead and say use, and the module is exploit multi-handler. And once it's there, let's go ahead and show options again. A lot of show options. All right, so this doesn't have any options because we haven't set them. We can go ahead and do show payloads, and it's probably going to list like 400,000 things. But let's, yeah, there is a bunch of stuff we can see. Every kind of possible payload. Interpreter, PowerShell, whatnot. So you use as per your discretion, or whatever payload you want. In our case, we used, if we go back to our actual command for NSF Venom, let's see, I think I might have missed it. Or we just do this. All right, here it is. So NSF Venom. So we use PHP, interpreter, reverse TCP, right? So that's our payload. So it's probably something we should sort of stick with, right? And let's go ahead, go back to Metasploit. So set and payload, and add our PHP, interpreter, reverse TCP. All right, and show. As a matter of fact, that's really it. We can go ahead at this point in time. Actually, no, let's show options and see if everything's fine. So lhost is, you know what, we should probably set the lhost to our address. I'm not sure why it didn't. It might automatically happen when they phone in, but in any case, we're gonna set our lhost to my own IP address, and that's 86.185. The port is fine because we already did that in our payload. So it's just make sure it matches, right? There is a chance here that you mess up and you sort of show, set the wrong payload and then what your actual exploit was. And I think it might work. I think if as long as you choose a Meterpreter payload here, it will. As long as you have a Meterpreter payload in your exploit, it will take over. So I'm not 100% sure on that. So just make sure they both match. So we'll go ahead and run, and we can see it started reverse TCP handler on that on our port. In meantime, we can go ahead and that's not a TST, it should be a PHP. So I'll just go ahead and execute this. So if we go back, oh, here it goes. It already happened. So we started the listener. As soon as I clicked on that, the stage happened. Interpreter session 2 opened. Give us the time and so on. So user clicks, our listener is on, and it's working. And at this time, we can just go ahead and go through. I don't know, sys info or something like that, just to see. Yeah, so we're on the system. You can see Meterpreter has a different name there. Let's say get UID. All right, so we're local service, and I can even, let's see, what else can I try to do? I can do shell. And that will, so now I'm on Windows. Well, it might freeze, crash, and burn. The demo gods might be finally mad at me. All right, terminate channel now. All right, so that was a demo of client-side exploits. I'm going to go ahead and sort of pause the demo right there. The machine on AWS is still up and running, so I'll leave it up for a little longer if you guys want to play with it. Also, if you want to play with other exploits, other payloads, there are I don't know the number, but it's a vulnerable machine on purpose. So you can go look it up on their wiki page, and there's just many different ways to exploit. So I find it very good to practice, not just to learn how to exploit, but also kind of learn the concepts of it. So yeah, I have two more things to cover, sort of my closing thoughts, right, and questions and answers. So let me go ahead and go through some best practices, right? So blue team stuff, right? While I'm much more comfortable with, sort of the pen testing workflow, procedures, tactics, all that stuff, I do have some education, and as a pen tester, you also need to know how to defend targets, right? Because otherwise, how are you going to tell them how to protect it, right? So this is my opinions here and my things. I do realize that there is a lot of people in our guild that are, masters at defense, and can find APTs and so on. So I'll do my best here to give you some good info, right? So first things first, in my opinion, red versus blue is not a thing, especially if you're not a real attacker, right? So if you're a pen tester, or if you're on a blue team side, any pen testing engagement shouldn't be you versus them. As a matter of fact, if you're a blue teamer, your company just paid to have somebody perform this service, so you should take advantage of that and try to learn and try to get better. As a matter of fact, maybe it's one of the best ways you can get yourself some budget and buy whatever you need to buy next year, right? So to sort of get this red and blue, not versus, right? I would say, be engaged on these calls. I would want to make sure that if I'm on the defense side, I'm on the scoping calls. I'm getting constant communication. I'm asking for a report maybe a day or two before it goes to my boss and his boss, right? And hopefully I have some rapport built with the pen testing team, so they won't just throw me under the bus. But work with the testing team, and especially important, if they're going to recommend something, that you can actually implement that thing. I've heard of horror stories where the pen testing team comes in and says, you got to do blah 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 X, Y, and Z to fix this, critical risk vulnerability, and that X, Y, and Z requires $1 million tool, or requires you to work, for the next 6 months, 24 hours, or rewrite the entire damn, your system you have. So obviously work with the pen testing team, and if you are communicating constantly, ask for that report a little bit ahead, and I would actually be on a call with them when they're compiling their report and when they're putting their recommendations together, so they can be realistic. You don't need to change it, but you can give them your input, right, and something that you can actually implement. So honestly, if you start sort of approaching it that way on both sides, I think you're going to see much better communication. You're going to see much better outlook from your much better value from your pen testing engagement. Same exact thing goes for the pen testers, right? There's no ego, right? Ego can be in a way. You got to work with your defense team, because at the end of the day, our job as red teamers is to help them close the gap and and be invited afterwards, right? So definitely work with them. On the service side, exploits, right? There's so many things that can go into detail, but as sort of high level, update your stuff. Keep it updated. Vendors generally do a pretty good job of patching when there's something available. So if you can, try to have a plan and be on a schedule, and this shouldn't be shooting from the hip. It should be a process, right? Keep updated, harden your things, hide stuff. I mean, if APTs are attacking you and there's ways to circumvent things, right? If they have enough time, sure, they might be go through. But guess what? If you're hiding ports and they're not exposed to the internet, if you're hiding services like SMB, RDP, things like that, right? They're not going to show up in these opportunistic scans, and you're much more likely to not be attacked in the first place, right? I think the attackers tend to take the path of least resistance, right? So, and at the end of the day, be proactive. I mean, if you're waiting to respond to something once you've been attacked, trust me, it's going to take you more time. It's going to cost a lot more money. Unless you have a company that's, like Crispy over here, that's, that he's on your retainer, I'm pretty sure the day of he's going to cost you quite a bit of money, right? So do things proactively, and maybe even put companies on retainer if you need to. Have these plans, follow these standards. Do some hire companies that do assessments to tell you things ahead of time before it's too late, right? Obviously, firewalls, IDS, IPS, the good old fashioned SOC, right? All of these help, to block and maybe even, detect and minimize the impact on that. So you guys probably know more about that than me. So I'll just kind of move on. The client side exploits, in terms of stopping these, it might be a little more difficult, right? So I just kind of some ideas of mine here is, outbound traffic is a thing too, and should be looked at, stopped, prevented, and your firewall shouldn't not only face the outside. So many networking appliances, right? Even some switches, routers for sure, right? Firewalls, you can set up ACLs, and some of them can do more than one ACL, and especially all of them can do at least one ACL in direction. So set up some ACLs, and if you're in whitelist stuff, right? So if me sitting here at the front desk don't need to access, who knows service, it shouldn't be allowed. And if you're trying to just blacklist it, it's going to be tough to keep. It's going to be about tough to keep, things. So whitelisting is much better. It's easier to control. For privilege escalation, lock up your stuff, update, monitor, assess. A lot of operating systems now do a pretty good job in restricting privileges, right, to applications. But at the end of the day, without going, zero trust. And also maybe it's simple. I remember, default accounts. Like I remember SQL Server or even Oracle was even worse, having like 15 different accounts that come up on startup, and they're all default, and some have admin privileges, and people left them on. So just shut all of that stuff off that doesn't need to be on there. So, and otherwise, if you're gonna find Metasploit attacks, there are ways to even Meterpreter, right? That's encrypted, right? There are ways to do that. So obviously Meterpreter has TLS encryption, but guess what? Unless the attacker is clever, the SSL cert that they use is signed by, I can't remember, it's Metasploit or Rapid7 Meterpreter or something like that. So you can literally find it by looking at that cert. So many ways to do that. And finally, just as being clever here, if you use the supercomputing, super cool quantum machine, next generation big data, hyper AI, all your dreams will come true. I just mean to say there, be careful of people just throwing stuff at you. You should always just test your tools and make sure they actually work. And then let me go through some of the red stuff, and I'll try to speed up because we're coming up to the end. As a red teamer, and red teamer, I mean pen tester, the more you can enumerate and the more you know about the organization, the more effective you're going to be, period, right? Always validate everything before hitting that run or exploit button. You might have messed up some of those options. Actually, a lot of vulnerabilities happen to be, I say that down here, read up on exploits. A lot of them happen to be working only against one operating system, one application with these specific parameters or specific config. And if you hit it with that and you don't match up, right, you're going to crash the service, or who knows, something unintended is going to happen, right? So read up, validate your vulnerabilities, probably through your vulnerability scanner. Use Nmap, does a great job at doing that. We've seen Metasploit has some auxiliary scanners that do that as well. And then read up on your exploits. And while you're doing it, you're going to avoid crashing things, and you're going to learn a little bit about how that exploit works. Searchploit is great. Metasploit exploit database is another great tool. Let's see. Your exploits may not work, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that if I found this vulnerability, like one of the ones we did, the Engine 9 or whatever, and if it didn't work, guess what? I'm still going to report it and just say, I only had a week of time, right? With limited scope, limited time, and I was not able to exploit it. However, the attacker is not limited by scope, and the attacker is going to, maybe dwell on your network for what's an average, 6 months or something like that. And, given enough time and effort and resources, they're just going to exploit that. Provide value. Our job is to provide value, right? And that's basically done through our reporting, right? So when you report recommendations, they should be clear, concise, easy to operationalize. And actually, maybe as a red teamer, push for having as much knowledge about the target on those scoping calls. You don't want to get out of the scope during the assessment, right? You end up, who knows doing what, jail. When you push for that scope, is you push when you're doing those scoping calls, and you push to have as much knowledge about the target, as much time, and as much leeway to do things. But then at the end of the day, you report things clearly, concisely, and one of my sort of key things here is don't write reports for other pen testers. I've learned that from one of my mentors here. You write your reports for your audience. So your executive summary audience is that the manager or whoever, right? You write it for them. Your operational team, you write the report that they can understand, they can quickly and easily operationalize, and actually makes their job easier. If you do those things, you're going to do a great job and be invited again. Don't mess up on your reports. Don't anything that's kind of hard to guess and understand. It gets thrown out. I like to write my reports concise as much as I can, and then that detailed information should be attached as an appendix so they can actually go through and maybe replicate what you did, or when they fix it, retest it, and so on. And on that note, take great notes, right? You can't have a good report or a good test if you don't take notes. So KeepNote works well. I love KeepNote. And as a matter of fact, I have forgotten, I was going to remember because I'm so smart, and didn't take some great notes. And then, in a pen test, forgotten that they had a vulnerable machine that I never even went to. So, it could save you some time. And as far as learning, get a mentor. And when you learn about something, try to go beyond the surface, and learn a little bit more. So to wrap it up here, Metasploit Unleashed course is free. It's amazing. Go through it. It only takes a couple hours. And if you practice, maybe a bit longer. And then I do have to give out, first of all, shout out to Sans. I took their network penetration course. It was the best training I've ever had. So if you get an opportunity to get your company to pay for that, or other ways, sign up, and you're just going to learn. Doesn't matter what it is. But there's the cheat sheet. And finally, Tony Kisasondi, one of my mentors, who's helped me set up that demo testing environment and overall held my hand in many a time. Thank you so much for helping me be where I am. The one and only Turtle, walking me through things when I was a little bit newer, and love the Undercraft, the entire Undercraft crew, and you guys, for being there and sharing your knowledge. So I think I'm losing my voice. I'm going to turn it over to Turtle.
Thank you, Zoran. Man, great content. Greatly appreciate you taking the time to put all that together for us and to present tonight. We've had some really good questions and some great comments on the Q&A, both on Guild Chat and on YouTube. So really quick, we'll run through some of those. And then I have a few quick announcements, and we'll call it a night. From YouTube, from Earth Life Studios, during economic downturns, have you seen companies still budgeting for security assessments and testing, or are they putting security in the, hey, it'd be nice to have it, but we've got to spend our money elsewhere category?
That's an excellent point. And I'm going to go ahead, and you guys see that on the screen, you see the circle. Some of the questions I might have to circle back to you. But as far as that one goes, I think there is a little budget constraints, going on everywhere. But what you can do is as a salesperson, as a pen tester, as a company, you can make sure that your service is relevant. So recently, guess what? We're receiving COVID-19 phishing emails coming out of the bazoo. So maybe you combine your pen test and make sure you have a phishing campaign in there that's targeting these vulnerable remote users. And I think you'll get a little more bites on your service. So on a final note on that, attackers are obviously not taking a break. They're actually accelerating, if anything else. So hope that answers that.
Awesome. All right. From user Blue Fox, let's see. At the Clever Shark, have you ever had to explain to a customer the difference between a vulnerability assessment and penetration testing? And
yes.
If so, what's the easiest way that you did that, and how?
So I spent, like I said, many a year in the past actually selling this stuff, right? So in sales job, it's definitely that comes up a lot. So honestly, the vulnerability assessment, I say this is a quick check to see, to see what's vulnerable out there. But if you really want to mimic what the real world attacker will do, you want to do a pen test and honestly point out the main difference. With a pen test, we're actually measuring the amount of risk you actually have in your organization, right? And so one provides a lot more value. The other one is just a stepping stone. So talk about providing more value, talk about providing risk, and actually proving that you are in fact vulnerable.
Awesome. All right, we're going to go to some questions from the guild here. So Ace is up. Here's the hazing for you, buddy. Now, Ace is up. What is the most efficient way to identify exploits after running an Nmap besides running another vulnerability scanner, something like, Rapid Sevens, Nexpose, or Green Bone scans, or things of that effect?
All right, so excellent question. I'm probably the worst person to answer that because that's where I live. I live in that research phase, right? So honestly, obviously, your Nessus and all that will help you greatly. And I would say if you're doing this professionally, you got to save yourself some time there. But other than that, Nmap seems to work pretty well for me, right? Nmap has a lot of scripts, so that the HTTP methods, right? If I see something, it looks, I can run that, or you can just run the Nmap script, all of them basically, or the safe scripts. And it will spit out a lot of information for you as far as what they think is vulnerable. The last one may be least efficient, but does teach you some humility at least. Is you find there's the Connect Engine 9 or whatever. Research it right in vulnerability exploit database. Searchsploit is one way. So let's say I find a service that works, I can just type in Searchsploit and it will pop up with what vulnerabilities are, or what, exploits are available.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of using Searchsploit myself, especially when you can identify the version number. It definitely speeds some things up, so that's definitely a good call out. All right, next question that we've got is from Havoc. Havoc says, hey, this isn't Metasploit related directly, but I'm curious to know a little bit more about a high-level overview around the API or script that you used for the AWS security group on the back end for the guild members to add IPs to that test box that you have.
Oh man, so I will go ahead with Tony's permission, right? Tony is on. I'm pretty sure he's on YouTube listening in. So he helped me write the script that basically whitelists your IP, and then I had a lot of hard time getting the Metasploitable 3 into AWS, but in essence, it's a little bit of a process. So with his permission, I'll probably do something for the guild, and maybe we can keep replicating it.
Awesome. Okay, great. Question from Shizzle.
Please welcome
Shizzle.
the
Do you find that
Undercross
hosting
very own.
your test vulnerable images in the cloud is more practical for practicing an external engagement compared to hitting your local VM? And if so, what would you say are the pros and cons of each approach?
I don't know if necessarily would be more practical for practice, right? There's pros and cons, right? So I would say doing it locally. Like I ran my thing locally here just because I'm reducing the amount of things that could go wrong, right? So if I want something to be a bit more stable, I tend to like to run it locally, and it's on my own network. Nobody can access it, right? So it's a bit more secure for me personally. However, on the cloud, I guess it's nice, especially if you're remote. So if you have like my laptop, I didn't do this from my laptop. It just cannot do 2 VMs and it, run everything else. So if you have a machine like that, and if you want to practice from the airport, popping up a little instance like that on AWS is great. Just make sure, like we did today, that you have some mechanism to, whitelist or protect that instance from who knows who attacking it. But I don't really see for practice too much difference. It's really up to your situation.
Awesome. A quick shout out. Tony is in the YouTube chat right now, I believe, saying hey to everybody and kind of throwing some AWS knowledge tied to that API. So just a heads up there.
Nice.
You've gotten quite a few thank yous from people for the questions that you've answered. I don't believe that I have any other questions for you at this point. Got a lot of feedback saying that they appreciated the demo and showcasing a little bit more hands-on and a little bit more of a real-world type of setup on how you use the tool. So just wanted to give you that feedback. That's really a positive thing.
I think demo gods were okay with me. it was me like not typing or mistyping stupid stuff. So, but what I'll do is, if somebody's interested, DM me and I'll kind of tell you how I did it, what I did, and share that so you can practice on your own, especially if you're newer. I'm always available.
That's awesome, Zoran. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Thank you for that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of announcements really quick, and we'll wrap this up. Awesome, man. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Really quickly, just a couple of quick announcements. Want to go ahead and throw out a discount code for our online store for merchandise. If you head over to theundercroft.net/store, you can use discount code LUCKY7 for 15% off your order. Got all sorts of really fun merch, t-shirts like what Zoran and I are wearing, all sorts of really cool posters that are information security related, etc. So definitely, if you haven't yet, head over there and check it out. We appreciate you supporting us to allow us to continue to bring great content to you like this. Next week, Timito will be bringing you hacking HTTP protocol with Postman. All sorts of really fun stuff there. We're going to deep dive into the HTTP protocol as a whole, responses, request codes, and all that fun stuff. But also really look into using the Postman tool to manipulate those requests and how you can do some really fun and tricky type things there. That's all we have for tonight, folks. Thank you so very much for joining us. It has been an extreme pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to host this evening in lieu of Cochise not being available as he goes and is taking care of some personal matters this evening. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next week.